sending your way. Oh, more than a Betty, yeah, but God's beauty. God, thank God for sending your way. Oh, you're royal, a part of God's kingdom. God, thank God for sending your way. Oh.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Be Beauty Podcast, where we are bold,
educated,
ambitious, unstoppable, talented, and yielded, where we want you all to grow and glow with his purpose, on purpose, and for a purpose. I said for a person, for a purpose. And y'all, we are really excited with this being Black History Month, and one of the acronyms for Be Beauty is the E, where we want to educate. We want to educate people who are tuning in to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify on Black History Month, and not just making this another thing where we're just promoting the history of Black history, but we're really getting to the bottom of some deep conversation that is necessary. And so in the middle of Rashonda and I, we have Michael Carter, who is the Senior Advisor to the President Chief of Diversity Officer here at Sinclair University. So we are in his art exhibit, Our Journey in America. And we also have with us some young scholars. And go ahead.
These are young scholars from Sinclair Community College, Montgomery County Schools.
Welcome. Well, we're glad to have y'all. So we're just going to get right into it. Go ahead, Shonda.
I wanted to open up with a saying. And it says, radical empathy means putting in the work to educate oneself and to listen with a humble heart to understand another's experience from their perspective, not as we imagine we will feel. Radical empathy is not about you and what you think you would do in a situation you have never been in and perhaps never will. It is the kindred connection from a place of deep knowing that opens your spirit to the pain of another as they perceive it. Now, Mr. Carter, can you expound on this?
Well, that's a great quote from the incredible writer and author Isabel Wilkerson. And the name may be familiar because Isabel Wilkerson wrote the Pulitzer Prize winning book, The Warmth of Other Suns, which outlines the great migration of blacks to the North. But Isabel Wilkerson just has such a great way with words, and when you think about radical empathy, people oftentimes, they'll tell you they want to hear your story, or you're sharing something with them, but they want to interject. They want to equivocate. They've got a bigger fish story. But radical empathy is just letting a person express how they feel and where they are, and just listening to that, and not trying to fix it, solve it. I shared with you both earlier, my wife's version of that would be, she comes home and shares with me that she's had a tough day.
Right.
And she says, Michael, I don't need you to solve it. I need you to just listen. And me listening is the radical empathy, not trying to fix it, not trying to say, oh, well, you should do this. Or I experienced this, the same thing at work, just listening. And that's what radical empathy is. And we also discuss how hard that is for Americans to do, because we tend to listen until we have a chance to answer. We're thinking about our response while the person's talking. So, but I think that's just really, really powerful. And the work that we do, that quote and the quote, another quote we discussed, which was Mark Twain quote, it ain't what I know that gets me, what I don't know that gets me in trouble, it's what I know for sure that just ain't so.
Right.
Those two quotes are probably, there are folks around Sinclair that hear me talk about these two quotes more than any other that we discuss.
So why do you think when it comes down to Black history, why do you think, and I think for Rashonda and I both, the importance of having you and dialoguing with you is we want to understand our history and we want to know our roots. not to point fingers at anybody, but I want to know more about my history. Why do you think our history is something that is not written into our school's curriculum and different things?
To teach about the experiences of blacks in America is to refute the lies that Americans have been told for 400 years. So if I teach the truth, then I've said what has been previously taught is not true.
Right.
That's difficult for Americans to do. So if I talk about, for 400 years, if I say how lazy and not brave African Americans are, if I say that, I can't talk about slavery and all the institutions and everything that enslaved Africans in America built and
Right.
did, or all the inventions.
Right.
One of the things we oftentimes talk about in this space is you think about this, even as far as in the space of inventions. Most inventions that impacted America from, let's say, 1700s to early 1900s were invented by white Northerners or blacks.
Yep. I remember you saying
Slavery stunted intellectual growth in the South because necessity is the mother of invention. And if I don't need it, I don't invent it. So black people are doing this difficult work, which people say blacks are lazy, which is just absolutely ridiculous. But to tell that lie, so I have to refute any of this. If all these things, if we talk about all the inventions, if we talk about all the accomplishments, if we talked about the bravery of someone like Henry Johnson, who in World War I, he was the first American of any race to receive the coup de grace, the French Medal of Honor. When he saved 20 lives, he was wounded 21 times. Nobody studies that, but we learn about Betsy Ross.
Right.
I mean, you think about how crazy this is.
Yeah.
But if I talk about the bravery of Henry Johnson, it refutes everything I've taught before. So that's why people are uncomfortable. And it's you also have to challenge the cruelty. I think about when you talk about the anti-critical race theory and the fight against teaching history. Cruelty's the thing.
Right.
So it's not just, well, I'm concerned. It's, well, you can't teach Ruby Bridges. We're just not slavery. So what happens is it's almost like the book 1984 all over again. So we're not just going to not talk about slavery. We're not even going to talk about black accomplishment.
Right.
We're not going to talk about black perseverance because even that makes racists look bad.
Yeah.
So we can't talk about that because there's a reckoning. And I think one of the other things America has a problem with is in the midst of all these stories, I also have to admit that I was wrong.
Yeah.
So there's been a resistance to that. And you can't, we talked about, so can you imagine in a family and there's abuse? A family can't heal until you acknowledge the abuse. Yeah. And the abuser acknowledges the pain that they have caused.
Yeah.
There's no moving forward, and that's where we are in America. There's no moving forward unless America acknowledges that there has been a lot of atrocities that we need to reckon with, and deal with that.
Right.
So that is one of the difficulties, one of the many difficulties we have. And just because it makes you feel uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not true.
Right.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and I think even when you equate that to faith, it's like God even causes us to be uncomfortable for a season to only make us comfortable again. And we have to be willing to have uncomfortable conversations that can cause healing, that can cause reconciliation in not just a natural realm, but also what is it doing in the spiritual realm. We gotta have these conversations. It's important to talk about our history. Our history is a part of the American history. Without our history, there's holes.
Right.
There's gaps. And so now, even with the exhibit, how did you start? What made you start with this art exhibit? 'Cause this is Our history, I mean, my God.
Well, what I love about this space, and I had a student from Dayton Early College Academy here yesterday, and what he said, I asked the students how they felt being in the space, and he said, it feels like home. And I had to give him a fist bump because that's how I feel. I'm here more than I'm in my office in Building 12 because for me, this space is healing. Because I'm around this, I'm in it, and it energizes me being in this space. So it's important to have these stories. And I think what this is by no means professionally done. This is just stuff that it's a collection of most of my stuff. We've put it up. But what I love about it is people are encouraged to handle it and touch it and feel it and see it and take pictures. And a lot of places you can't do that. You have to look at it as behind glass, which is great.
Right.
But this is just a little bit different
It's more
in
personal.
that you can do that. So there was a gentleman, Khalid El Hakim, who brought a few years ago the hip hop mobile exhibit to Sinclair, and we had that. It's a mobile exhibit, and this mobile exhibit was awesome. And so we had conversations. I spent 2 days with him, and I began thinking, and I said, I'm history major. We take these history trips. I got a couple things. So I called him and said, hey, I don't want to appropriate what you're doing. What do you think about me having an exhibit? And he said, brother, we're in two different spaces.
I love
So
that.
you go ahead. And in fact, he said, and here in a few months, we're going to take him up on it. He said, when it becomes permanent, I'll donate something to the exhibit. So we're looking forward to that. But that was the impetus. That was the thought. So as frustrating, I wanted to do this sooner, but as frustrating as everything COVID caused, it allowed me to just really plan how this might look. So I drew it up. I put things, in my mind in the order that we wanted to put it. We drew stuff up. And I was walking past this space one day on campus, and during COVID, there's no one around. Students had occupied this space and were doing things in it, but that got twilighted. So I walked past, I see it, I call Scott Markland, who vice president, who this kind of fell under. I said, Scott, any designs on this space? And he said, what are you thinking? And so I told him what I think. He said, yeah, go ahead. And I thought it was going to be temporary. But
I'm glad it's
well, in my mind. So and I was talking to somebody, and when I mentor, young leaders, I say, don't tell your master plan because it might scare people. So in my mind, this was permanent, but I said, we're going to set up a temporary exhibit because when you say this permanent and you put that out there, then there are going to be people who can't see your vision,
Right.
who it may scare.
Come
And
on.
I didn't know who that might be. So in my mind, it was permanent.
That is.
But, I just said temporary. So I set it up, put it up. And of course, I shared with you that, you got to get the blessing I had to get the blessing of my wife. So she comes the Friday before we open up September 27th of 2021. My wife comes in and she looks around, she puts her hands on her hip, looking around. She says, was all of this in our house? And the books, a lot of the books, but a lot of the images were here at Sinclair in storage. They're in our attic. They're at my brother's house, who, Darnell, history major, got his master's in history. He's an attorney. So we set it up, and that's kind of how it came about. And now, from being I was scared when I thought it might be like a 2-week run because I'm like, man, taking all this stuff down. So it came about that it's permanent. So we're really, really excited about that. And we've had about 1,700 visitors in that time. People have come through. So we feel great about that because people are able to see this space. I had a group last night of UD grads. And one, Eric Krissick, great friend of mine who is a principal in West Carrollton, his wife got a group, and before they went to the University of Dayton game last night, they came by, and we took them through. So we had 3 groups of Dayton Early College students yesterday, and we had Sinclair students the day before. So we do probably 3 or 4 tours a week now. Okay. So it's just exciting. And then, we tell people we'll do it on the weekend. We'll do it. I did a tour on Christmas Day a couple years ago. So we're just.
I think that's what I love about this so much is when Lewis told us about you. We were like, this is perfect. But we want to highlight this exhibit, one, because it's in our community, but even just understanding this is a tank full of resources. This is a tank full of information. And when I walked in, and I think Rashonda felt the same way, it was like, oh, wow. And I felt a sense of pride of my Blackness in my history. And understanding, like, Betty Boop has always been portrayed as a Caucasian woman in our minds. But to learn that Betty Boop was actually African American.
Yeah, Esther Jones was a jazz singer.
Yeah, so it's like learning other pieces of our history outside of the norm, the Martin Luther King or the Frederick Douglass or the Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman, but actually seeing pieces. Gordon, what was his name? Gordon, the slave. He has a photo of it. And the emancipation, even watching that show, it's like it's so much.
True story.
It's a true story. It was painful to watch.
Well, and
I'm gonna be honest with you.
So think about children see the picture of Gordon, and for those of you who can't see it, it's the picture of the enslaved African who has the whip marks on his back. But we don't unpack that story.
No.
And it's a powerful story. And it's a powerful story of possibility. And so can young people learning that I can make a choice to do the right thing. Yep. So people did the right thing. That was the George Floyd of 1863. So he gets to Baton Rouge after escaping from his plantation, 80 miles, 10 days, rubs onions all over his body, throw off the scent of the dogs. He gets there, Union troops are there, they protect him, and photographers take pictures of him, put it in Harper's Weekly, which would be the People magazine of the day, goes out all over the country, so people were able to see. And the power of that was Southerners had to walk back their lie about what slavery was. And then Northerners who were not affected, didn't have proximity, saw this is a noble fight.
Yeah.
This is something that we should invest in. So it was really powerful. And how powerful is that story? That's something we can celebrate. Although what he experienced, people did the right thing.
Right.
And there are all kinds of stories like that we should share. And, the 25% of the cowboys in the American West were black. So how powerful is that for not only little black children to know, but for white children to know? It helps normalize blackness.
Right.
See, the thing is, we're taught in school that white people enslaved us, white people freed us, and not much else happened.
Right.
And that's simply not the case. And there's so many opportunities to tell painful stories and great stories about this collaborative effort that has been the American experiment. And we just don't talk about it. I guess the beauty is, no matter how frustrated we get with this fight over critical race theory, the stories cannot be suppressed because we're not dependent on history books anymore to teach history. And I talk about all the time. So how did most Americans find out about the Tulsa Race Massacre? LeBron James wrote a check. PBS did a documentary. And Russell Westbrook wrote a check. Smithsonian did a documentary. See, these stories can be told, and we're not dependent on schools to teach them. Most Americans found out about Tulsa, not in school, but through PBS. So these stories are going to be told, and they can be told. And I tell you what, there are going to be plenty others.
Yeah. No, and I definitely think now we have a generation of people that are not afraid to use their voice. They're like, okay, Let's talk about it. Let's heal. Let's identify this trauma, but how do we move forward?
Everybody can be a movie maker because everyone has a phone.
Yep.
I mean, you think about just what happened to George Floyd. If the young lady didn't have a phone, she had a phone, and essentially that became a movie,
Yep. It
which
did.
impacted the country. So people can get this stuff out, and that's what's wonderful. It can't be suppressed, and there are just many wonderful stories to tell, and telling the painful ones help us to say, do a reality check about, hey, let's prevent this from happening in the future.
And let's not go backwards as a nation. Let's undo it, unpack it, and let's move forward. How do we deal with it? And even we talked about earlier the mental health, how the trauma in our communities with the redlining, and you showed Rashonda and I the first time we came, the demographics, even not just redlining in the housing market, but even redlining in our, how'd you put it, the greenery.
Yeah, the
tree
green
line,
space.
the
Yeah.
green space.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, when you think about it and you see it, it's like, oh wow, it's real. When you think about off Germantown, that's the largest trash area in our community, but it's only on the west side of our town. Why? And all of that is going out into our communities. So it's so much deeper than just the history of our people, but it's even what's currently going on in our communities from that aspect and the educational aspect.
We can't deny that racism has long-term implications. The things that have been done, whether it's redlining, you think about, so in part of the exhibit, we've got the images, the blackface and the ugly images and the language. That affects everybody today because many whites still feel blacks as inferior. And we take that on.
Yeah,
We struggle with what beauty is.
true.
That's 400 years of being told what is beautiful and what is not. So everyone is impacted. So we're impacted with that. Whether you have the right complexion,
Yeah.
whether you have good hair, bad hair, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But we take all that on because we're taught that. And unless you have someone who says, time out. And I just give a powerful, I had great parents, but my mother was unapologetically black and just would tell me, but she grew up in Tulsa and she told me about the greatness. One of the things, and she never put this on anybody, and then you figure out certain things about your parents over time. My mother never straightened her hair.
Wow.
Ever. She never straightened her hair. So you think about that because she felt that she didn't want to do that. And she didn't dare. My sister did, my aunt, and she never said anything to them about that. But for her, that was her resistance.
Yeah.
That was her small form of resistance. And then many of the things she taught us about black greatness was just really important. I shared with you, I never felt less than or inferior my whole life because of what I was taught at home.
Yeah.
Who I could be, who I was, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
And we love that. Rashonda and I talked about you, how it's an aura of pride that comes off of you. Even walking the Sinclair campus with you, you spoke to everybody you passed. Everybody said, "Hey, Michael, Mr. Carter," to you walking back to the exhibit with you. And it was just like, it wasn't about just the blacks talking to you. To be honest with you, it was majority Caucasian people that were saying what's up to you. And you took something personal to each person. Like, my man, you been working out today?
Right.
And he like, yeah, I have, whatever. But, and then when we got in here and we asked you about that, you was like, look, I demand to be respected. And I want to say that demanding to be respected as a black American doesn't mean I'm in your face with a gun.
Right.
But demanding it is something that you possess within.
It's how you carry yourself.
And it's how you carry yourself.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you carry yourself with such a poise and a confidence, not an arrogance. It's a confidence of knowing who you are. And that's what we want for our Black people. Know who you are. And demand it, but demand it by the way you carry yourself, the way you interact. Change the narrative in your community. Change the narrative in your school. Change the narrative in your workplace. Change the narrative when you go out to dinner.
Right.
It's about the way we carry ourselves. So we have some of the students here with us from Young Scholars. Did I get that right? All right now. Do y'all have any questions for Mr. Carter before y'all get up out of here? Anything you want to know?
Is most of this yours or?
Great question.
Great question, and yes, most of it, I'd say over 90% of it. But the wonderful part of this has been people have begun donating. So there is, behind me to my left on the pillar, there's a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. Shooting pool behind his back. There was a teacher from Northmont. So I shared with the teacher that I got, there were 2 photos of him playing pool at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. And I wanted both of them, but there was only one of that one with him shooting pool behind the back. And the young lady said, I can't sell you that one. That's the only one I have left. So I got the other one. And I brought a teacher from Northmont in and was sharing that story. 2 weeks later, I get that photo in the mail.
Wow.
And then a dear friend who's a professor at Wright State, Krista Aguirre, called me and said, hey, Michael, I've got a cookie jar over here, this green cookie jar. And she said, we're either going to have a breaking party or we're going to donate it to the exhibit. I said, no, don't break it.
Right.
Bring it here. And she said, we're going to have a breaking party because this was my grandmother's, and I just can't see this anymore. Mm-hmm. So I said, no, bring it to exhibit, because with these ugly things, Jim Crow era, we're able to provide context and tell the story.
Yeah.
So that's a great question. So we've had more and more people donate various things to the exhibit.
And that's really dope. Martin Luther King was a pool shark.
Learn how to play in seminary.
That's
really good.
We don't talk about,
Yeah.
but that makes it more identifiable to say like, oh, okay, I like to play pool. You know?
The great thing about that, beside the playing pool, it allowed him to rub shoulders with people who typically didn't have access to him. If we think about, so in the big spaces like, Washington, D.C., everybody could go.
Right.
But in these churches and in these venues, only people who got to hear him speak were blacks and whites of means.
Right.
For the most part.
Okay.
But when he's rubbing elbows, these are average, everyday people who might not have access to him. And he's able to ask them questions about what they're experiencing, how they feel. And that was the power of that. And he would say that was some of his best work, when he's hearing from people who are experiencing things every day.
Yes.
I think that's a part of history, too, when we have Black History Month, that is not talked about either, the personal side of the person. Mm-hmm. We just hear about the works that they have done and accomplishments that they've done, but not the personal side of them so much, which makes it like they're untouchable and they're unrelatable to us, even though they're Black.
And I love what you say about that, and the fact that these are human beings and have clay feet. Yep. And make mistakes and do things, but that doesn't diminish the ability to do something meaningful.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct.
One more question. What you students got? Anybody?
I have a question for y'all. How do you feel hearing this information?
For me, it's like, we have social studies class in our schools, but it's like so much more that I would never know if I wasn't here.
Right. Would you like to have Black history in your school incorporated into, the curriculum?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's very important for everyone to know.
We were talking about, I'm Tina Sandy, instructor, Young Scholars Program. We were talking about that in our meeting last week. One of our other instructors did a presentation on Black history. And I just asked informally from our students who come from all different schools within Montgomery County, how many of you actually have a Black history program, an assembly, something like that in your schools? And the response was no one. Apart from my school, which is, I'm also a Trotwood teacher, and we have a Black history program which will be on March 1st. So,
awesome.
But that would be an interesting study to do, I think, just to quantify what's in place or what isn't in place in our Montgomery County schools, I think.
So many school districts are afraid of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what do I do? What's the pushback? I'm afraid of parents.
Yes.
So that is just, it's unfortunate. Young man, you were gonna.
I was just gonna say, I think there's definitely a way to push more Black history in school systems, especially in like predominantly white institutions, because like as you said, there definitely would be a lot of pushback and like upset parents and just the school district not allowing like certain curriculum that they have to teach. But I think there's definitely room for improvement.
Thank you for that. It's we can start. So I gave a quiz. My grandkids go to school in Vandalia. So given a quiz, and the quiz, the answers aren't Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks.
Right. Right.
And that really spurs. So I didn't, I had no idea about that. Like Black Cowboys and things like that, that can touch everybody, and that people typically, really don't know much about. Eleanor Roosevelt, I think that is who incredible woman who really pushed and supported Black greatness. Had the Black, the Black cabinet. Mary McLeod Bethune was one of her best friends, that she flew with Tuskegee Airmen to promote the Tuskegee Airmen. Marian Anderson, who was denied the opportunity to sing in Constitution Hall, which is owned by the Daughters of American Revolution, they refused to let her sing in 1939. Well, she said, okay, she's going to sing at the Lincoln Memorial. 75,000 people came. And then Eleanor Roosevelt resigned from the Daughters of American Revolution. See, that's a statement.
Yeah.
That's a statement. And how powerful it lets people know you have an option in this. It may not be, you may not be able to lead a march of 200,000 people, but there are things each and every one of us can do
to contribute to it. And I think that's what we're trying to do with Be Beauty. Even with Charity, is it Charity Adams, who was local, born in Dayton, Ohio.
Graduated from Wilberforce.
Yeah.
She was on our board. We've got an auditorium on campus.
Wow.
Charity
I didn't know that.
Early Auditorium.
I just saw that on Instagram,
Yeah.
if I'm being honest, that she had the only female Army.
Yeah, she was the first. And we've got
Lieutenant
a book
or
back
something.
here. One of the bases is going to get her name.
Wow.
They're going to change it, and it's going to be two generals, her and someone else, that they're changing from a Confederate general. So, there's plenty of greatness right in our community. So there are things locally we can do to celebrate Louise Troy, who was incredible woman and has a school named after her. So there's just a lot of greatness here in our community that we can celebrate. Funk music.
Come on now.
Dayton.
Yeah.
Dayton, Ohio. I mean, just the huge influence of music. All these, Paul Lawrence Dunbar,
Yeah,
all
Paul
these
Lawrence
things that right here and others.
Right.
Well, listen, we thank you. We thank you to the young scholars and for the educators bringing them in to be a part of this. We thank Mr. Carter. We're thankful for what God is doing in your life and the fact that he has given you a passion about your history. And man, we thank God for your mom, for her being a woman of excellence and her standing, because it shows that she instilled in you and your siblings to stand behind what you believe and stand behind your truth and your blackness. And then with Be Beauty, this is the education. We want everybody to be educated, not just on the things of the kingdom of God, but even things that are a part of our history. And so if you are in the Dayton, Ohio area, reach out to Mr. Carter, Michael Carter, on Facebook. Is that correct? How can they get a hold of you?
So Sinclair.edu /diversity, and the diversity page will come up, and everything you need, my email, all the events and activities. We've got just tons of events and activities for people can participate in, and they're all free and open to the public. So,
Rashonda, how can they get a hold of you?
I am Miss Divine 34 on Instagram, and on Facebook I am Rashonda Young. And I just want to encourage not just the black parents, but also the white parents and whatever ethnicity that you are, to come and learn about history, because we're all history. We are all a part of this history. So I would just encourage everybody to just come down, men, women, children, everybody, and see history.
Yes.
Thank you.
We love it. So I'm Lady A. McGuire on Instagram. On Facebook, it's Ashley McGuire. Now y'all go be bold, educated, ambitious, unstoppable, talented, but most of all yielded, where you grow and glow with his purpose, on purpose, and for a purpose. But before we get out of here, hit the bell notification on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, so you know every time we drop a fire topic. Like and subscribe, and we out.
You're beautiful, so beautiful. God, thank God for sending you to